Thank you, Vladimir Zhukov, for joining us, head of IR of Norilsk Nickel. It's great, and it's a great pleasure to have you here with us. And I guess I want to proceed by saying congratulations on your winning position in the Emerging EMEA Executive Team Survey, where you are actually ranked third overall in the metals and mining sector. Tell us a little bit, how do you feel about the awards and what do they mean to you?
Well, thank you for your kind words, and it's definitely been our pleasure to be awarded this time around. Look, I should admit that ranking high is, I guess, fortunately for us, is not part of our KPIs, but it's definitely I would say it's definitely a strong incentive, kind of moral incentive tool, not just for my team, but also for the internal visibility of our team within our large organization. Because whenever we have external recognition by somebody as respected as institutional investor, that definitely, helps to score points within the organization.
Very good, thank you. And we've obviously gone through a very tough year last year. It's still somewhat lingering this year, but you've also had to deal with an environmental crisis last year around May time. Share with us a little bit how you dealt with that situation from an IR standpoint, and what are the measures, practical measures, that you've actually taken to mitigate that and to engage with investors?
Yeah, well, last year was I guess was somewhat unfortunate for us, because in addition to the common challenge that everyone faced globally, which was the COVID-19 epidemic, we also had this very unfortunate environmental incident at the very end of May, where due to a combination of reasons, we had a leakage of a significant amount of diesel fuel into the nature. Mm-hmm. Well, internally, I guess the first thing that we decided to do, that we have to be as open as transparent about it as we can, because being open and transparent is the only way to be able to tell your story. Because if you stay quiet, when these things happen, there'll be always people who will be telling story on your behalf, and you may not actually like the way they'll be telling your story. So we tried to be as proactive as we could. We did a few things that we wouldn't do normally. And for instance, we launched a special section on our website where we published almost real-time updates regarding the incident first, and then the cleanup progress. And that part of that was actually like a live news almost, and we were publishing things there as soon as they were kind of released. We also started putting special presentations and just 100% dedicated to this incident on top of our traditional investor presentations that were discussing the usual matters like financial results, operational results, strategy, etc., etc. And actually, by a certain point, this presentation, just this incident alone, got to a quite actually substantive size. It was, I think, like up to like 30 or 40 pages, but we actually had very good feedback from our investors because they appreciated this transparency. We also hosted a dedicated conference call, which was, I think, in terms of the numbers of attendees, was the best ever attended conference call of our company. We had, I think, more than 500 people on the call, actually, where we had our key people, chief operating officer and other senior management, making a presentation and then taking questions from the audience. And of course, we had to pay quite significant attention to our internal communications in the sense of our board of directors, because we have a few international directors on the board, independent directors on the board, including the independent board chairman. And we had to keep them in the loop, again, almost like in a real-time basis for the first few months since the incident. Mm-hmm. So I guess, God forbids for anyone to be in the same position as we are, but I guess our advice to others is to be as transparent and open and as you can, of course, given the circumstances, and to kind of update the market as quickly as you learn the news.
You have also ranked very highly in our survey in the ESG category, which is a fantastic achievement. Share with us a little bit about your ESG journey. Where are you at? What are the challenges, and how are you actually incorporating that as part of your IR strategy?
ESG pillar of our IR strategy, I say significance of this ESG pillar of our IR strategy has been growing along with the market awareness and attention to this subject. And I would say recently, again, along with the market, we have added as essentially as a separate pillar also climate change strategy. And strategically, we have this annual cycle where every year, and last year that was December, we publish updated long-term strategy. And last year's strategy was, which actually came out in December, was a huge step forward in terms of us making very concrete commitments in a number of ESG areas, including climate change, whereby we improved our disclosure, like we started disclosing our greenhouse gases emissions in line with international protocols, so-called GHG protocol, adding scope 3 disclosure, which we hadn't had before. But we also set quite concrete targets for our greenhouse gases emissions for year 2030. Again, this is something that is totally brand new. But and in part in response to this environmental incident we mentioned earlier, that happened at the very end of last May, we launched a very major reshuffle of our internal processes on anything that has to do with ESG, starting from the management, like there were a number of new positions created within the company, including, for instance, a new senior vice president in charge of sustainable development, to things like risk management committee, with a chaired by the CEO of the company, with a special focus on managing environmental risks. So I think that was a combination of kind of external and internal factors that led us to this kind of a significantly beefing up our focus on this sort of ESG matters.
Very good, very, very interesting. Obviously, ESG, part of it is the corporate governance. Are you able to share with us a little bit how corporate governance is actually tackled at Norilsk Nickel?
Well, in our case, we run a corporate governance system that stems from the agreement between the major shareholders, because we have 3 major shareholders at Norilsk Nickel that have entered into a 10-year agreement, which is expiring in about 2 years' time. And that major shareholders agreement provides many inputs into the corporate governance arrangements at our company, especially at such institutions at the board of directors. So, for instance, our board of directors has a kind of fair balance between all key shareholders, all key major shareholders, but also we have truly independent directors. We have 5 independent directors out of 13. And as I said, the board's chairman, Mr. Gary Penny, is also independent director. He is a very prominent global mining exec in his sort of a past career. When you have such a strong board with a strong independent directors and international directors, of course, and also you have direct representatives of major shareholders, so-called non-controlling shareholders, you are under very close scrutiny from number of angles. And I think this puts kind of like additional disciplining pressure on the management, because they don't just have to respond to the usual stakeholders, but they actually have large major shareholders on the board asking them questions. So I think we're in somewhat unique situation. I mean, our company, Norilsk Nickel, in a sense of being under this constant, and this scrutiny is constant. It's not like from one board meeting to another. It's constant. So that I think that has been quite, I think, instrumental for keeping our corporate governance up to highest industry standards.
Very interesting. Vladimir, you also mentioned earlier about consistency and transparency in communication. Share with us a little bit about your journey with regards to IR digitization, and what are the tools and practices that you have incorporated into your IR program that actually makes your IR engagement and your work so much more effective?
Well, since the COVID epidemic and global lockdowns, we all switched to virtual meeting tools like the one we're using currently. And to be honest, I think in terms of the effectiveness of IR activity, it's actually more effective. And I would guess that might be actually a bit more effective for some of the investors, because clearly doing virtual meetings, you can keep a high intensity because you simply save on travel, and also you improve your geographical reach, because there are certain places you wouldn't normally go just because there are either not too many investors there or it's just too far to travel. Whereas virtual meetings, they really don't have any geographical limits. And this is now the unique time when we can have really truly global outreach. Because previously what we used to do, we used to split in teams. One team would go to one region, another team would go to another region, and then we would do rotations because, if we've been to X place, next time we go to Z place or Y place. Whereas now we can, almost every hour exercise can be offered to basically any location globally. So I think, and of course, when you travel, especially when you travel to distances far away, you have things like jet lag, etc., which do kind of put a bit of a drag on your efficiency as especially as a speaking person. So from my perspective, I say virtual, especially with the people you know. Of course, I think virtual meetings are not very efficient for setting up like new connections with people you haven't previously met. But for the people you know well and those people who know you well, I think it as as efficient as actually meetings in person. What we also started doing, we use various checks of the quality of our IR, and your survey is one of those checks. Another check that we do is we run the so-called perception study. And a couple of years ago, we switched this perception study into essentially online survey, whereby previously we had an external consultant doing like phone calls for us and trying to, whereas now we just do, again, we use a third-party consultant, but we do this online survey. And running an online survey of investors, first of all, response rate increased. The speed of arranging it and processing it increased incredibly, because from the time I launched the survey to the time I have result, depending on how much time we allocate to respond, it could take 2 to 3 weeks, whereas previously the exercise will be taking like months. So definitely, I think this is a very useful tool. As I said, we started doing it before the COVID epidemic, but I think it's a very useful tool, and we're planning to use it more going forward. So I guess in terms of digitization, that will be probably main changes in our practices over the course of past couple of years.
Yeah, very good. So staying close to the investor perception and market sentiment is important, of course, to shape your engagement. Now, you've obviously been on the sell side before. You've been a research sell side analyst. You've now got nearly 10 years of experience in investor relations. What would you say from your experiences on both sides? Are the top tips to an IRO, and what are the must-have tools or must-have structures that you have to run an effective investor relations program?
Well, as an analyst, I think having a background being a sell-side analyst is actually probably one of the most ideal backgrounds to switching to investor relations role, because you have both corporate perspective, market perspective, industry perspective, so all sorts of angles, which are very, which is normally a very rare combination in one position elsewhere. Because elsewhere you'll be focusing on just something, one of those, not all of this in combination. But being equity research analyst, you used to dealing with very market-based and market-oriented people, both within your organization, which is normally a large brokerage house, and as your clients' investors. Whereas when you go into IR role, you enter a bit of a different world, which is a corporate, and corporates by definition are not that oriented to real-time market news flow. They have their cultures, and the culture, I mean, I would say, I think there is much less difference in culture between investment bank X and Z as compared to large corporation A and B, because large corporations are like each of them is unique, and because of this culture difference, this is an adjustment, and it's I wouldn't say it's sometimes it's a challenge, because as getting used to working with external audiences, as I say, very market oriented, like buy side, you kind of establish certain credibility. You know how to establish your credibility, and you know what is expected. Whereas when you switch to a corporation, where except for the person who hired you, no one else might know anything, not just about you personally, but about stock market and what really impacts things. So you have to really establish yourself internally, and this is as I say, this is a different. It requires different, I guess, set of skills, different communication skills, and you have to do a lot. I would say a lot of internal education and explaining people, because investment bank, if you a brokerage house, if you want to do like something that is, say, beneficial for your organization, of course everyone would tell, okay, go ahead. Whereas here you have to explain to the people why you want to do this, why we need to do this in the first place, and that may not happen very quickly as you initially hope. So it takes time, it takes diligence, it takes patience, and it takes developing internal relationships, which are not least even more important than the relationships you have externally with, say, buy side.
Yeah, very much agree. Thank you very much, Vladimir, for that. And now we would like to get to know Vladimir on a little bit of a personal level, if we may. So we have a few quick questions that we will aim at you. The first one is, please name a historical figure that you would like to meet, and what would you like to ask them?
Well, lately I got a bit of into Russian history. And there is a particular period in the Russian history that I've been actually focusing in my reading. This is whatever preceded the great revolution of 1917 and whatever happens afterwards. So I'm actually at this point in time I would be very curious to meet with Vladimir Lenin, who arranged the revolution, and the question I would ask him, if he knew how it all ended, would he still do it?
Very good. Very interesting. And to a lighter note, what is your favorite band or singer?
Well, it's a Russian band. It's called B2.
B2. What kind of music do they do?
It's a rock music. It's a rock. Yeah. It's not hard rock music, but it's a rock music.
Interesting. And which quote from a movie do you use on a regular basis in your daily life?
Well, to be honest, the quotes I use more often are from Russian movies, and I don't want to back translate because they wouldn't appeal to you. But the ones I use from say Hollywood movies is "I'll be back."
Very good. And which book did you read last?
Well, again, as I say, I'm reading actually a few books on the Russian history by Russian authors, but in terms of might be interesting, I actually read recently The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab.
Yeah.
Which was, I would say, it was it received surprisingly to me before I read it. The reason why I decided actually to read it because there were some I would say maybe politicized commentary on the content of this book here in Russia, and I like do fact checking, so I decided to read the book for myself to make my own mind, and the book was surprisingly to me very, very, I would say, sharp and comprehensive, and touching on many whole range of right things, surprisingly. Even though the book wasn't that big, but it covered whole range of aspects of life, starting from governments to personal well-being of people, and the questions and the issues were raised. I think they were quite sort of contemporary. So
yeah, very true. Stakeholder value. Great. And the last question I have for you is, what, now that we've started with a new year, what kind of personal objectives or perhaps resolutions that you have for 2021?
Well, a very personal objective is actually I play tennis. That's one of my favorite hobbies, and I participate in tournaments, like amateur tournaments. So my personal ambition is to get the first place in one of those tournaments.
Where are you now? On the leader table?
So I play doubles. I play what's called professional amateur doubles. So I play with a professional against another professional plus amateur, and the best we've done so far is the third place.
Oh, fantastic. That's excellent. Well, thank you very much, Vladimir Zhukov. It's been an absolute pleasure. And again, congratulations on the success that you have achieved in the 2020 Emerging EMEA Executive Team Survey in Metals and Mining, overall the third place, in line with your tennis successes as well. It's been a pleasure, and it's great to learn so many insights from you. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other in Moscow this year.
Yeah, likewise. My pleasure. Thank you very much, Amani.
Thank you.